Please leave a comment where you are watching from. It was just past 3:30 a.m. The clock behind the counter blinked in a dull red glow, marking time in a place that felt frozen. The empty parking lot stretched out under a flickering streetlight, and the only movement came from a moth hurling itself repeatedly against the glass door, frantic like it knew something I didn't. The dusty trail fuel stop sat off Route 217, a stretch of road so forgotten it wasn't even listed properly on Google Maps. One entrance, one exit, nothing but miles of forest and fields in either direction. I'd been on the overnight shift for a few months now. Most nights were quiet. A few trucks, maybe a local passing through, but usually just me, the buzzing lights, and the soft hiss of the soda machine. No cameras, no backup, no one around for miles. I kept the radio low, some classic rock station crackling just beneath the hum of the fluorescents. The sound kept my mind from drifting too far. I was halfway through organizing the shelves behind the counter when I heard it, the low rumble of a diesel engine breaking the stillness. A pair of headlights crested the hill and drifted into the lot, gliding slow like the driver didn't quite trust where they were. The truck was an older semi, long and rust-stained, its paint dulled by sun and time. It hissed to a stop by the diesel pump, and I waited for the driver to emerge. A moment passed. Then the door opened fast, and a man dropped down, moving quickly. Too quickly. He didn't even glance at the pump. His boots hit the pavement hard, and he beelined straight for the store. The automatic doors hissed open as he burst in. He looked around wild-eyed, breathing heavy, sweat matting his hair despite the cold outside. His face was pale, drained of color, and his hands trembled slightly as he stepped toward the counter. "You all right?" I asked, already reaching under the counter where we kept the first aid kit. But it wasn't blood I was expecting. Something about his expression made me think this wasn't that kind of emergency. He stared at me like he was trying to decide if I was real. Then finally he spoke. "I'm not crazy." Great. I was alone, it was the dead of night, and now I had a guy who led with that. "Okay," I said slowly. "You want to sit down? Get some water?" He shook his head violently and stepped closer to the counter. His eyes flicked to the windows, to the dark beyond the lot, and then back to me. "There's something out there." My stomach did this small, involuntary clench. I didn't want to ask. Didn't want to know. But I had to. "What did you see?" He swallowed hard, like the words were fighting him on the way out. "It was just off the road. Maybe 10, 15 miles back. I thought it was roadkill at first. A deer or a buck. Big one too. Then it moved. I felt the hairs on my arms stand up." "Moved how?" He licked his lips. "It stood up. On two legs." I stared at him, trying to process that. "Like it was a guy. Maybe someone in camo." "No, it wasn't a guy." He paused, breathing shallow. "It picked up the deer. The whole body. Just lifted it, like it weighed nothing." A chill crawled up my spine. He wasn't lying. His voice, his body language, none of it screamed prank or hallucination. He was rattled, genuinely rattled. And then it turned. Looked at me. I swear it did. I don't know what it was. Tall. Covered in hair or something. Big arms. Shoulders like a linebacker. But its eyes, they were wrong. He shivered, rubbing his hands together like he was suddenly freezing. "Wrong how?" "Too bright. Like when you shine a flashlight at a cat and they reflect back." But these were already glowing. Red. Like coals. I didn't know what to say. Silence stretched between us, heavy and dense. He looked over his shoulder again, like he expected the thing to burst through the doors at any second. It walked into the woods, just carried the deer over its shoulder and disappeared. I nodded slowly. "You sure it wasn't a bear?" He gave me a look like he wanted to believe that more than anything. "No bear walks like that. No bear lifts a buck that size and walks off like it's carrying a sack of laundry." There wasn't much else to say. He didn't buy anything. Didn't get gas. Just stood there for a minute, as if trying to figure out whether to call someone or keep running. Then, as if a decision clicked into place, he nodded to me, muttered a quick thanks, and headed back outside. I watched as he practically sprinted to his truck, climbed in, and gunned the engine so fast it echoed into the trees. I stood behind the counter, staring at the now empty lot, unsure what the hell to do with what I'd just heard. Call the cops. And say what? A guy came in saying Bigfoot lifted a deer and gave him the stink eye. No, that wasn't going to fly. A few minutes later, one of the locals came in for coffee. Jerry, retired guy, lived a few miles out and always showed up around 4 for the early edition of the paper. He noticed I looked a little off. "You all right, son?" You look like you've seen a ghost. I told him about the trucker. Not everything, just the basics. Big thing. Lifted a deer. Walked into the woods. Jerry didn't even blink. Oh yeah, he said, like I'd just mentioned it might rain later. That's the wild man. Lives up near Crooked Ridge. Been around a long time. Seen him myself when I was a kid. I laughed, waiting for the punchline. But he didn't offer one. You're serious? He nodded. Some call it Bigfoot, some call it something else. My granddad used to call it the Ridge Walker. Whatever it is, it don't like being seen. That should have been the end of it. Some local legend, a spooky story told over beers and bonfires. I would have written it off as just that if things had stopped there. But they didn't. About 2 nights later, same shift, same eerie stillness. I just stepped out back to dump some trash when I heard something in the tree line. Not close, but not far either. A snapping branch. Something big. Heavier than a deer. Slower than a bear. I froze, bag still in hand, and strained my ears. Another crunch. Then silence. I didn't go investigate. I wasn't that kind of idiot. I backed slowly into the store, locked the door behind me, and stared out into the dark. Nothing moved. But I knew something was there. Over the next week, more weirdness started piling up. A mangled deer carcass found behind the dumpster, like it had been dropped there from 10 feet up. Trash cans knocked over, not just tipped but thrown. Scratches on the back door. Deep ones, too high for a dog, too far apart for a cat. One night, the power flickered and went out for almost 2 minutes. The emergency lights came on, painting the store in dull red. I stood behind the counter with a flashlight, heart hammering, the silence outside now somehow louder than before. And that's when I saw them. Eyes. In the woods. Just 2. Glowing faintly. Watching. They didn't move. Didn't blink. I stared back, unwilling to look away. I don't know how long we stood like that. Me inside the glass box of the store. It, just beyond the reach of the lot lights. Then the power snapped back on. The lights inside buzzed to life. And the eyes were gone. I don't know what that thing was. I don't want to know. But I haven't taken a smoke break out back since. I asked Jerry about it again a few days later. He just sipped his coffee and said, like I told you, don't like being seen. Best thing to do is pretend you didn't. So that's what I try to do. It was the fall of 2007 when we moved into the house, a quiet little place nestled at the edge of a sleepy New Jersey suburb. I was 14 then, the kind of age where you're just beginning to outgrow your fear of the dark, but not enough to ignore when something feels wrong. Our backyard stretched out into a patch of undeveloped land, not quite woods, not quite open field, just a vast, tree-speckled sprawl that disappeared into darkness at night. The neighborhood was calm, slow-paced, where everyone knew each other by name, and nothing ever happened. At least, that was the story until the night I took out the trash. It was a Friday night, around 10 p.m. My parents had just gone to bed, and I was wrapping up the last of the chores. The only light came from inside the house, casting a yellowish square onto the patio. I remember the cold air rushing in as I slid open the glass door. Autumn had crept in fast that year. The sky was clear, and the stars hung like frost above the dark outline of trees. I stepped onto the patio, dragging the garbage bag behind me, when I felt it, that sudden, inexplicable prickle along the back of my neck. The kind of feeling that makes you slow down, listen harder, and realize just how many things you can't see in the dark. Then I saw them. At first, it was just movement in the darkness. 2 shapes, tall and black, gliding across the far edge of the yard where the light didn't reach. I froze. Their silhouettes were barely distinguishable from the night itself, but I could see them clearly enough to know something wasn't right. They were too tall, too thin. The way they moved was what struck me most, a kind of fluid hopping, their bodies bobbing unnaturally like kangaroos or deer, but wrong. Their arms swung low, their torsos strangely elongated. They moved in bursts, one moment still, the next bounding forward soundlessly, their limbs snapping into place like marionettes. I stared, frozen on the patio, my breath puffing out in shallow clouds. For a moment, I tried to rationalize it. Deer maybe. But even then, I knew deer didn't move like that. Deer didn't stand up on 2 legs. I reached for the porch light switch. The second I flicked it on, both figures stopped dead. Their heads snapped toward me in perfect unison. It was the way they moved, that sharp, unnatural motion, that turned fear into something colder, deeper. Then impossibly they stood, straightened, rose from all fours to 2 feet. I couldn't breathe. They weren't animals. They weren't people. They were something else. As soon as the light hit them, they bolted. No noise. No stumbling. They turned and sprinted toward the tree line, vanishing into the darkness like they had melted into it. I stood there for another minute, too afraid to move. Then I turned and fled into the house, slammed the sliding door shut, and locked it with shaking hands. I didn't sleep that night. I stayed up, listening to every creak of the house, every rustle of leaves outside. I told myself it was a trick of the light, an overactive imagination, a weird dream. But none of it felt like a dream. Over the years, I've tried to forget it. I never told my parents. I didn't want to sound crazy. But even now, 15 years later, I remember every detail. The way they moved. The way they reacted to the light. The feeling that I had seen something I wasn't meant to see. I never saw deer in that neighborhood. Not once. And even if I had, deer don't stand like that. Deer don't run like that. Deer don't look at you like that. As time passed, other things started to happen. Once, a few weeks after that night, I noticed something at the edge of the woods. I was walking home from a friend's house, dusk settling around me. Our backyard was visible from the street if you looked between the houses. As I walked up the sidewalk, I saw it, a dark shape standing just inside the tree line. It didn't move, didn't run, just stood there tall and thin, watching. I blinked, looked again, gone. I wrote it off as a shadow. Then there were the sounds. Late at night, I'd hear them from my room, scraping, like nails dragging across the siding. Soft thumps, like something landing on the roof. Once, I heard what I swore were footsteps pacing just outside my window. I never worked up the courage to look. I wish I had. Or maybe I'm glad I didn't. One night, maybe a year later, I had a dream, except it didn't feel like a dream. I woke up but couldn't move. Sleep paralysis, they call it. My body was frozen, but I was wide awake. I could see the room, the ceiling fan spinning slow above me. Then I saw the shape. In the corner, near the closet. Tall. Thin. Head bent unnaturally to the side. Its arms reached nearly to the floor. It didn't move. But I felt it watching me. I don't remember falling asleep again. I just remember waking up the next morning, drenched in sweat, heart pounding. I kept that to myself, too. Years went by. I moved out, went to college, started a new life. But I never forgot that night on the patio. And I never forgot those figures. A couple of years ago, I was back in town visiting my parents. It was late, maybe around midnight, and I was outside having a smoke. The air was crisp, just like that night. The stars were out. The house looked the same. And then I heard it. A crunch. Soft. Distant. I froze. Looked toward the edge of the yard. Nothing. But I swear, just for a moment, I saw movement. Something gliding just beyond the reach of the porch light. I went inside and locked the door. Sometimes I wonder if I imagined it all. If it was just some weird childhood memory twisted over time. But every time I step outside at night, I find myself glancing at the shadows. Watching. Waiting. I was 6 years old the first time I saw him. Or it. I'm still not sure what to call the boy who appeared by our table that night. It was summer of '99, somewhere along the outskirts of Arches National Park in Utah, though it might have been Colorado. We'd been driving all day in the kind of heat that makes you forget where your skin ends and the seatbelt begins. My family was on a road trip, one of those long, meandering vacations where the journey mattered more than the destination. We stopped at a gas station around dusk, the kind of lonely, sun-faded pit stop that looks like it's been aging since the '70s and might crumble if you leaned on the ice chest too hard. The sun was setting behind a ridge of red rock cliffs, painting the sky in swathes of violet and tangerine. I remember the way the light flickered against the cracked pavement, how it turned the shadows long and strange, like something was stretching beneath them. There was a little picnic area off to the side, a few warped tables under a buzzing fluorescent light that sounded like a fly trapped in a jar. My siblings and I sat there while my parents argued quietly over a paper map inside the car, trying to figure out where to sleep for the night. We were picking through bags of chips and slices of bologna, what my dad jokingly called a gas station gourmet dinner, when the boy appeared. He didn't walk up like most people. One moment, we were alone. The next, he was there, standing just outside the circle of light like he'd been carved from the shadows. He looked around 12, maybe a little older, with long black hair and skin the color of river stone. His expression was strange, too serious, too old for a kid his age. He wasn't scared or shy. Just quiet. Watchful. He asked if he could sit with us. My sister, always the talker, waved him over without hesitation. My brother and I just stared. There was something in the way he moved, like his joints weren't in quite the right places. He sat slowly, carefully, like someone who wasn't used to sitting. His voice, when he spoke, was low and clear. "Have you heard of skinwalkers?" he asked. I didn't know the word, not back then. But my brother and sister both froze. I remember their eyes, wide and fixed on him like he'd just said something dangerous. He went on before we could answer. "They look like people, but they're not. They can become animals or old men. They can steal your face if you let them too close." He wasn't telling a story. Not like kids do, all excited and messy. This felt different. Like a warning. A memory passed down too many times. My sister tried to change the subject. She asked him where he lived, if he was traveling too, if his family was nearby. But he didn't answer. Just stood up after a moment, nodded once, and walked away. Disappeared into the shadows like he'd never been there at all. When we told our parents, my mom laughed it off. "Some kid trying to scare you. It's probably a local thing." But my dad didn't laugh. He got real quiet and said something about Navajo legends. About witches and tricksters. And then, almost as an afterthought, he said something I've never forgotten. "You shouldn't say their name too much. It calls them." That night, I didn't sleep much. The wind outside the motel whistled through the vents like something alive, and every creak of the walls felt like footsteps. I remember pressing the pillow over my ears and trying to think of anything else. But it didn't end there. The next morning, we were driving down a narrow stretch of road that twisted through canyons and scrublands. It was early, sunlight hadn't fully filled the sky yet. My sister was half asleep in the back, my brother playing with a handheld game, and I was staring out the window, watching the dry earth pass by. That's when the car in front of us stopped. No brake lights, no warning. Just stopped, right there in the middle of the road. My dad muttered a curse under his breath and slowed our car to a crawl. I craned my neck to see why they'd stopped. At first, I thought it was a deer. But it wasn't moving. It just stood there, motionless, smack in the middle of the two-lane road. Its body was stiff, too tall, too thin, and its eyes, God, those eyes, they didn't reflect like a deer's would. They absorbed the light, like deep pits in its skull. No one got out of their cars. No honking, no yelling. Just this weird, shared silence like all of us had been told to hold our breath. I had my little disposable camera in my lap, and I lifted it to take a picture. I adjusted the lens, focused through the dusty window, and snapped the shot. But when I looked through the viewfinder again, it was gone. No deer. No creature. Just the empty road stretching into the distance. I blinked, looked up with my own eyes, and it was still there. I blinked again. Lifted the camera. Nothing. I said nothing. I couldn't. My throat had closed up with that strange, cold fear that feels like it starts in your bones. The other families slowly started moving again. The thing stepped off the road, walked into the brush with long, unhurried steps, and vanished. The whole time, it never blinked. Years passed. I grew up. The old disposable photo from that day, just a picture of an empty stretch of road, still lives in a box in my closet, tucked behind letters and birthday cards. I don't know why I keep it. Maybe it's proof. Or maybe I just need to remember that I saw something. Sometimes I think back to the boy at the picnic table. How calmly he spoke. How certain he was. Like he wasn't telling us a scary story. He was preparing us. I've tried to write it off so many times. I was tired. I was a kid. It was heat stroke. But that doesn't explain the camera. Doesn't explain the silence that fell over the car like a blanket. Doesn't explain how my father never forgot it, either. A few years ago, I told this story to a coworker. She was Navajo. She didn't laugh. She didn't smile. She just stared at me for a long moment and said, "You were lucky. If it wanted to cross your path, you wouldn't have had a chance." That stuck with me more than anything. There's this idea that the desert is empty. But that's wrong. It's old. It remembers. And sometimes if you stop in the wrong place or speak the wrong name, it remembers you. There's a stretch of road just outside my hometown that people don't talk about unless they have to. They call it the Fog Mile. Not officially, but everyone knows what you mean when you say it. It's a two-lane curve that connects Highway 88 to the east side of town. No lights. No houses. Just a mile of cracked asphalt lined by skeletal trees and dense woods that never quite feel right, even in daylight. I've lived here my whole life. Grew up riding my bike past the entrance to that road, always picking up speed when I got near it, even though I couldn't say why. I never saw anything myself back then, but I heard the stories. We all did. People seeing things. cars flipping for no reason, and always between 2 o'clock and 4 o'clock in the morning. Some folks called it coincidence. Others said the road was cursed or haunted. All I know is that even as a kid, the idea of being out there at night made my skin crawl. My uncle had a friend named Marco who nearly died there when I was 12. His story was the first one I heard firsthand, not from a rumor or a campfire tale, but from someone who lived through it. It was around 3 a.m. when Marco and his family were heading home after visiting relatives out of town. His 8-year-old son had fallen asleep in the back seat, and his wife and sister were dozing off too. Marco said he'd turned down the music, just trying to focus on the road. The world outside was thick with fog, so dense he could barely see 5 feet ahead. And then, just before the final curve, something stepped onto the road. He swerved hard to avoid it, whatever it was, and the car flipped. Just like that. One moment, he was driving. The next, the vehicle was upside down in a ditch. His sister and wife were killed instantly. His son was in a coma for a week. Marco walked away with just a broken collarbone and scars he never talks about. He told my uncle later that he'd seen a figure, tall, human-shaped, but wrong. No features, just a dark silhouette standing dead center in the road. He said the air around it had looked like water, rippling. And then everything went white. Other people have seen things too. A guy my mom worked with once said he saw a child standing in the middle of the lane at 2:30 a.m., barefoot and unmoving. He stopped the car, rolled down his window to yell at the kid, and then realized the face was off. Wrong-sized eyes, mouth open too wide. The kid turned its head slowly, like it had heard something far away. And then it vanished. Just disappeared in the fog. Another story came from my friend Elia. She was biking home late, way too late, after a shift at the diner, around 3:15 a.m. She was riding the shoulder of the fog mile, moving fast, earbuds in, when her front wheel hit something soft. She swerved, crashed, landed in the ditch. When she looked back, she saw a massive black pig standing on the edge of the road, staring at her. Only it wasn't a pig. Its eyes were human, completely human, and they followed her like it knew who she was. She scrambled up, ran, left her bike behind. Her knees were scraped raw, and she didn't stop running until she hit the first house on the next block. When she looked back again, the road was empty. The thing was gone. Elia doesn't go near that road anymore. Won't even drive it during the day. I used to think these were just stories. Urban legends. Maybe a bit of truth warped by fear. But that changed for me last summer. It was early August, a Saturday night bleeding into Sunday morning. I'd stayed too long at a friend's house across town, playing cards and drinking cheap beer. Around 3:10 a.m., I decided to head home, forgetting completely what time it was, or where I'd be driving. By the time I reached the fog mile, I was yawning behind the wheel, music low, windows down. The air had that weird, electric chill, not cold but sharp, like it was holding something back. I remember how the headlights barely cut through the fog. How the trees lining the road looked taller than usual, like they were crowding in. Halfway through the mile, I felt it. Not saw. Felt. Like someone was watching me. Not from ahead, not from the road, but from behind. My rearview mirror was black. I flipped on my high beams, but the fog just swallowed them whole. Then I saw the figure. Standing on the shoulder. Human height, thin, unmoving. I slowed down, instinct, I guess, thinking maybe it was someone broken down or drunk. But as I got closer, I realized it wasn't standing on the shoulder. It was in the trees. Just enough in the shadows that the features were impossible to make out. I passed it, and for one terrifying moment, I saw its eyes. Not glowing. Not monstrous. Just human. Tired. Sad. And watching me like it was waiting for something. Then my car stalled. Dead. No engine. No music. No headlights. I froze. The silence was unbearable. Not even the ticking of the cooling engine. Just me and that thing behind me, somewhere out there in the fog. I turned the key again. Nothing. I tried not to panic. Told myself it was a coincidence. And then, I heard something. Movement. Leaves crunching. Slow steps, not toward the car. Around it. Circling. I locked the doors. My breath fogged up the windshield. I held onto the steering, like it could protect me. And then, as if someone had thrown a switch, the car roared back to life. I didn't wait. I floored it, tires skidding across the wet asphalt, the car fishtailing once before gripping the road. I didn't look back. Not once. I didn't even breathe, right until I hit the blinking yellow light that marked the town limits. When I got home, I sat in the driveway for half an hour, lights on, engine running, heart still in my throat. That week, I asked around, carefully, subtly, to see if anyone had experienced something similar. Most people avoided the subject. One guy said his cousin saw a white horse in the road that dissolved into mist. Another said his grandma used to call it a Camino de los Muertos, a road for the dead. Some say the land was cursed long before the road was built, that the forest remembers a massacre that happened centuries ago, and it marks the hour of it every night, between 2 and 4. Others say it's a thin place, where the veil slips and something else watches from the other side. I don't know what to believe. But I do know this: the town finally built a new bypass 2 years ago. No one uses the fog mile anymore if they don't have to. It's still there, of course, but it's more weeds than pavement now. Even so, accidents still happen. Last month, a woman flipped her car trying to take a shortcut. She swore she saw someone kneeling in the middle of the road, rocking back and forth like they were crying. When the paramedics arrived, the road was empty. It was late September, and the last real warmth of the year was bleeding out of the trees. Me, my cousin Luca, our friend Ryder, and my dog Zemo went up into the hills around Kai, Alaska, planning a weekend trip before the snow made everything impassable. We weren't going far, just about 20 miles off the main logging road into some old game trails we used to ride as kids. It was the kind of place where silence settled fast. No people, no cell signal, just the sound of wind threading through the pines and the occasional call of something distant and wild. We had 2 4-seat ATVs, one packed with gear and the other with me and Zemo. Zemo's a 3-year-old Shepherdese, part German Shepherd, part Great Pyrenees. Solid, calm, smart. Nothing ever rattled him. Until that trip. We'd been riding for a couple hours, the sun already slouching behind the treeline, when Zemo started to growl. At first, I thought maybe he smelled a bear or a moose. We'd seen fresh tracks in the last clearing, but his hackles were up, ears pinned, lips curled back in a way I hadn't seen before. It wasn't a warning growl. It was a defensive one. Ryder laughed it off. Probably a porcupine, he said. But Luca didn't. He looked at the woods, his hand tightening around the rifle slung across his chest. He grew up closer to the land than us. Knew how to read it. He didn't say anything, but I saw it in his face, the way he scanned the tree line without blinking. We kept going. The camp was a small clearing with a half-collapsed fire ring and an old rotted stump we used to think looked like a bear. Nothing special, but we liked it for that very reason. No one ever came this far up, not without a reason. We pitched the tents, set up the fire, and started cooking. Zemo didn't eat. He kept pacing the edge of the trees, his nose low, tail stiff, ears turning toward sounds we couldn't hear. Eventually, he sat by the fire, but his body stayed tense, his eyes never leaving the woods. That first night, nothing happened. Not really. But we all felt it. The air felt too still, like it wasn't breathing. The trees didn't move. The crickets weren't chirping. The usual background noise of a living forest had gone mute, and all that was left was the occasional crack of something heavy stepping on something heavier. It came from all sides, slow, careful footsteps that would stop the moment we fell quiet. We tried to laugh it off, to chalk it up to deer or a moose walking the perimeter. But there were no grunts, no snorts, no breaking branches, just movement, and it never came close enough to see. Luca kept his rifle across his lap all night. I kept the fire high. Ryder stopped joking. We didn't talk about leaving, not yet, but we all felt the pull of it. The second night was worse. We hiked a few miles during the day, trying to reset our heads. Everything felt normal when the sun was high, like we'd imagined it. I even laughed at myself. Zemo seemed calmer. We saw grouse, fresh fox scat, even a distant elk trail. But as soon as dusk set in, the silence returned. No wind. No owls. No insects. It was like the whole forest had swallowed its breath. That night, something walked through our camp. I was half asleep when Zemo started barking, low and fast, tail between his legs. I sat bolt upright and grabbed my flashlight. I swept the beam outside the tent just in time to catch a shape, tall, upright, disappearing behind Luca's tent. I froze. It wasn't a bear. It moved like a person, but it wasn't a person either. Too tall. Too broad. Its movement was too smooth. Ryder yelled from his tent. Luca had already unzipped his and was standing barefoot in the cold with his rifle raised. We circled the camp, lights and guns out, Zemo at my heel. There were no footprints, no signs of anything moving. But we knew we hadn't imagined it. We slept in shifts after that, the fire burning through most of our wood supply. Nobody talked. Nobody joked. The woods were listening. The third morning we made the call. We were done. We packed quickly, barely talking, trying not to look too long into the trees. The moment we fired up the ATVs, I felt something shift, like whatever had been watching us knew we were leaving. Zemo barked at the forest once, sharp and panicked. Then we left. But we didn't leave it behind. That night, back at Luca's house, Ryder and I sat on the porch smoking while Zemo slept by the steps. The sun was down, and the stars were just beginning to peek through the dark. We were talking, laughing, trying to shake it off. But then we both stopped mid-sentence. Across the road, just past the fence, stood a figure. Not a person. Not even close. It was tall, easily 8 or 9 feet. The silhouette was wrong. Its arms were too long, and its shoulders were too wide. It stood still, perfectly still, as if it had just stepped out of the trees. Its eyes reflected red. Not glowing, reflecting like an animal. But this wasn't any animal I'd ever seen. It didn't move. Just stared. We bolted inside. Locked the doors. Turned off the lights. When we looked again through the blinds, it was gone. But the next day, we found tracks outside the fence. Huge prints. Bipedal. Spaced too far apart to be human. Luca poured salt across the threshold that night. Ryder wouldn't go outside without his flashlight. Zemo refused to leave the porch after dark. Whatever it was, whatever had followed us, it didn't want us in its woods. And now it knew who we were. We never went back. And sometimes late at night, I'll take Zemo out to pee and catch him staring at the trees again, his hackles raised, growling low, the same way he did on that first night. Like whatever it was is still watching. Still waiting. It was late July, the kind of muggy Louisiana night where the air feels like a second skin, thick and wet and crawling with crickets. My son and I were driving down L.A., 25, coming back from my cousin's place outside Franklinton. It was around 10 p.m., and the sky was pitch black, no moon in sight, just a sheet of darkness pressing down on the world. I remember the road clearly. Two-lane, cracked at the edges, lined by pine trees and dripping moss. A long, slow curve just past the old grain silos, where the fog tends to pool like breath from a sleeping giant. I've driven it more times than I can count, but that night, something was different. As we rounded the bend, I dipped the headlights for an oncoming car, a habit I've had since high school. That's when I saw it. At first, I thought it was a deer. Big. White or maybe pale gray. Standing just off the shoulder, still as a statue. But as we got closer, I realized it wasn't a deer. It was too tall. Its arms were too long. Its chest too wide. The thing wasn't hunched like an animal, it was upright. Still as hell, but standing like it was meant to be there. And it was staring. Not at us. At the oncoming car. Its head was low, tilted ever so slightly like a dog about to pounce. I remember tightening my grip on the wheel, every instinct in my body telling me not to slow down. My stomach dropped. My hands went slick on the steering wheel. This wasn't right. This thing wasn't right. The car passed by us in the opposite lane, their headlights flashing briefly across the thing's body, and that's when it moved. Its head turned. Slowly. Deliberately. Toward us. And when it looked at us, I swear the air inside the car changed. It felt like the air had been pulled out, like the cabin pressure dropped. My son whispered, "What is that?" That was the moment it shifted, subtly at first, like it was adjusting its weight. But then its entire posture changed. Its back arched, legs bent, arms raised just slightly like it was getting ready. It was going to run. I pressed the gas harder than I meant to. The tires chirped against the pavement, and we flew past it. I stared in the rearview mirror, expecting to see it chasing us. But the road behind us was empty. Nothing moved. Just trees and blackness swallowing everything behind us. Neither of us spoke for a while. I think we were both afraid to break whatever spell we'd just slipped through. Finally, my son said, "It was watching the car. Like it was waiting." I didn't answer, because I was still thinking about the way it looked. Its fur wasn't just pale, it was filthy, matted like it had been rolling in mud for weeks. The head. God, the head, it wasn't shaped right. The ears were pulled back like a cat about to fight, and its mouth was open wide, too wide, filled with teeth like broken glass. And its eyes. Yellow. Burning, not glowing. Like embers sunk into a skull. That night, I called my brother. Told him the story, swore I hadn't been drinking. He was quiet for a minute. Then he asked me one question. "How close to the river were you?" "Maybe 10 miles, I said. He let out a long breath. "Closer than I'd like to be." See, we've got stories in my family, passed down from my grandfather, who swore he once saw a man with the body of a wolf and the eyes of a man pacing the cane fields late one summer. Most people know the name, Rougarou, Louisiana's own version of the werewolf. But the real stories? The ones the old folks told in low voices when the kids weren't supposed to hear? Those weren't stories. They were warnings. Things like, don't whistle after dark. Or, if something calls your name in the woods, you don't answer. And, you see something on two legs with the face of a beast? You don't wait to see where it's going. My grandfather used to say the Rougarou doesn't always kill. Sometimes it just watches, follows, marks you, and once it's seen you, it remembers. Over the next few weeks, weird things started happening. Zoe, our dog, refused to go outside after sunset. She'd whimper and scratch at the door, but would not step off the porch. My son started waking up at 3 a.m. every night, staring at the window like something was standing just beyond the curtains. I started having dreams, deep woods, fog, and those same yellow eyes burning in the dark. Then came the smell. It showed up around the house one night in late August. A thick, wet, musky stink, like rotting fur and stagnant water. I checked under the porch, around the yard. Nothing dead. No skunk, no raccoon. But the smell lingered, just long enough to know something had passed through. One night, I went out to grab something from my truck. It was nearly midnight. Clear sky. No wind. Just me and the crickets. And then dead silence. Not a single chirp. No frogs. No wind. The same stillness I felt on the road that night. I froze halfway down the steps. My eyes scanned the woods behind the property. I didn't see anything, but I felt it. Watching. Waiting. I backed into the house without turning around. After that, I stopped going out at night altogether. So did my son. I don't know what we saw on the side of the road that night. Maybe it was something ancient. Maybe something left over. Maybe something that was never supposed to be seen. I'd been camping solo for years. Something about being completely alone out there, no voices, no phones, just the forest and my breath, always helped reset my head. Most of my friends thought I was crazy for doing it, but I liked the silence. The detachment, especially in the deep woods, where everything feels older than you are. That fall, I headed out to Olympic National Park, deep into the backcountry. No roads, no service, just miles of ancient trees and thick underbrush. The kind of place where it felt like time had stopped centuries ago. I hiked in late one afternoon, found a decent clearing near a stream, and set up my small tent between two moss-covered trees. It was cold, colder than I expected, but I had decent gear and a small camp stove. The first night was uneventful. A few owl calls, the distant rush of water, and the occasional creak of a branch. I fell asleep reading, shivering in my sleeping bag, but mostly content. The second night was when things changed. It started with the silence. If you've never heard true silence in the woods, it's not peaceful. It's wrong. You notice it immediately, not because something's there, but because everything else is gone. No wind. No bugs. No birds. Just this heavy, hanging void, like the whole forest is holding its breath. That's what woke me. I don't know what time it was, but the moon was high, and the inside of the tent was pale with light. I didn't hear anything at first, but I felt it. Something off. I sat up, careful not to make noise, and clicked off my headlamp. I listened, and that's when I heard the first step. Crunch. Slow. Deliberate. Then another. Crunch. 2 legs. Definitely not a deer. Not a bear either. Bears don't move like that. These footsteps circled the tent. Not fast. Not cautious. Just slow and aware. Like whatever it was knew I was listening. I didn't move. Didn't even breathe. My hand crept toward the flashlight, and the pistol zipped into my bag pocket. My heart was hammering so hard I thought it might give me away. Then it stopped. The footsteps halted just feet away, right outside the tent wall. And then breathing. Low. Raspy. Wet. It wasn't human. It was too thick. Like something dragging air through a throat not meant for it. It sounded like a smoker with lungs full of mud. It lasted maybe 20 seconds. Long enough for me to memorize the rhythm. Then it moved again, further away this time, and I sat frozen for what felt like hours. When the sun finally bled through the trees, I unzipped the tent slowly and stepped outside, heart still racing. I expected to see torn ground, paw prints, anything. But there was nothing. Just pine needles. The faint smell of damp moss. Except the silence was still there. No birds. No wind. Not even the sound of the stream. I convinced myself it was all in my head. Maybe sleep paralysis. Maybe a bad dream brought on by too much cold air. I decided to stay one more night. Idiotic, maybe, but I didn't want to run scared from nothing. That night, the footsteps came back. Heavier this time. I turned off my light the moment I heard them. They circled twice. I could hear the breathing again. Louder. More strained. My hand stayed on the pistol, but some part of me knew it wouldn't help. You don't shoot things you don't understand. Then the knocking started. A loud, hollow thud, like someone slamming a massive branch into a tree. Once. Then again. Steady. Not random. It came from just beyond the tent, maybe 30 yards away. Thud. Pause. Thud. Each hit made the walls of my tent vibrate, and with each one, the silence deepened. Then the smell hit. Rotting fur. Wet dog. Mold and meat. It coated my mouth, made my eyes water. I gagged, hand over my nose. The pounding continued, slower now. Rhythmic. Like it was trying to draw me out. I didn't move. I stayed locked in place until morning. And in the morning, I packed up in minutes. No fire. No breakfast. Just grabbed my gear, zipped my bag, and bolted for the trail. About a mile in, I looked back once and saw it. Just for a second. A shape between the trees. Tall. Wrong. Not a bear. Not a person. It didn't move. Just watched. And then it stepped backward into the shadows. Gone. I made it out. Got to my truck. Drove without stopping, without breathing, until I hit the edge of cell service and booked a motel an hour away. That should have been it. But 2 nights later, back home, I woke up around 3 a.m. My room was cold. My window, which I never leave open, was cracked. Just slightly. And in the stillness of the night, I could hear something. Breathing. I was 8 years old the night I saw him. It was one of those southern summer nights, the kind that wraps you in warmth and buzzing insects, where the air never really cools down and every breeze feels borrowed. We were at my great-uncle's farm, tucked away just outside of Point Pleasant, West Virginia. The kind of place where the stars stretch from one edge of the earth to the other, and you forget what streetlights feel like. The adults were hosting an outdoor movie night in the backyard, a big white sheet strung between 2 trees, a projector balanced on a folding chair, and half the family lounged across blankets and lawn chairs with cold drinks in hand. The movie was something old, black and white, but I barely paid attention. I was more focused on the woods. There was something about the woods behind the tree line, maybe the way the shadows pooled a little deeper than they should have, or how the trees seemed to lean inward, like they were keeping a secret. It wasn't fear, not yet. It was more like curiosity laced with a whisper of dread. The kind you don't notice until later. The sky had gone from orange to navy to ink. The only real light came from the projector flickering across the sheet and the soft glow of citronella torches lining the yard. I was sitting on a folded quilt with a cup of soda, half listening to the movie, when something shifted at the edge of my vision. A shape. Tall. Still. Black against the black. At first, I thought it was a tree. Then I blinked, and it blinked back. 2 red eyes. Round. Unblinking. Glowing like coals buried deep in ash. They weren't high up like an owl's or set in the brush like a raccoon's. They were too tall. The thing stood just behind the tree line, unmoving, watching. I didn't scream. I don't know why. Maybe some instinct told me not to. Maybe some deeper part of me knew it didn't want to hurt me. I just stared. The creature, or whatever it was, stood with its arms at its sides. Long arms. Too long. It didn't fidget or shift its weight. It didn't make a sound. Its body looked cloaked in dark fur or maybe feathers. I couldn't tell, but it shimmered slightly when the light from the movie flickered just right. And those eyes never left me. I looked away only once, just long enough to whisper to my cousin beside me. "Do you see that?" She was already asleep. When I turned back, the figure was gone. The space it had filled was just woods again. Just trees. But the feeling that something had been there stayed heavy in the air, like a storm that never fully breaks. I didn't tell anyone that night. But within the year, my grandfather died. Then my grandmother. Then my cat, which had been perfectly healthy, disappeared one morning and never came back. It wasn't all at once. It wasn't like a horror movie where tragedy hits in a single blow. It was a slow, aching unraveling. A death here. A goodbye there. Little things vanishing, people becoming memories. And through it all, I kept thinking of the eyes. Red. Silent. Waiting. As I got older, I mostly pushed it aside. Childhood imagination, I told myself. Some shadow and reflection, and a kid too wired on sugar and summer to know better. I almost believed that too, until I saw it again. I was 16, parked near the woods with a friend, the kind of aimless night where teenagers invent reasons to be in strange places. We were sitting on the hood of my car, talking about nothing, when she suddenly stopped mid-sentence. "Don't look," she whispered. Naturally, I looked. He was there. Same place. Same shape. Same red eyes. But this time he moved. Not fast. Not threatening. Just a single step forward. I didn't remember climbing back into the car. Just the slam of the doors and the silence as we locked ourselves inside. When I finally found the nerve to look again, the woods were empty. I've done the research. Of course I have. They call him Mothman. The first real report started in the late 60s, around Point Pleasant, just like where I'd been. People described the same things, tall, winged, red eyes. No one could agree if he was a warning, a curse, a protector, or just an echo of something older than language. The Silver Bridge collapsed days after a series of sightings. Planes went down. People disappeared. But others said he appeared before disaster. Like he knew what was coming. Like he wasn't the cause, just the witness. The one who watches. And maybe that's the worst part. Because I still see him sometimes. Once, standing in a cornfield just outside my apartment complex. Another time, at a funeral. And once, late at night, reflected in a puddle on the sidewalk. Not behind me, not around me, just there, as if looking through the water. He never moves. He never speaks. But I know when he's near. The air goes still. The wind dies. And I feel 8 years old again, staring at something I don't understand, wondering if it's here for me or for someone else. I haven't told many people. Those I do, they either laugh it off or look at me like I've admitted something unclean. But I know what I saw. I know what I keep seeing. And when I close my eyes at night, sometimes I dream of him standing at the edge of the trees. Watching. Not with hatred. Not even with hunger. Just waiting. And sometimes I wonder, what happens when he finally moves? It was August 2019, and the mountains were quiet in the way that only burned places can be. My partner, another couple, and I were camping on my family's lot at the top of Slate Mountain, just on the edge of the Tule River Reservation in Central California. The fire scars were still visible, twisted stumps, ash-charred trunks, open sky where there used to be thick canopy. The pier fire had burned through 2 summers earlier, leaving the forest thinned out and raw. Most people didn't come up here anymore. No shade, no privacy, too much wind at night. But we weren't most people. It was my family's land, and I felt safe there. At least I used to. That night, we were bundled up around a small potbelly stove in the center of our tent circle. No campfire. The risk was too high with how dry everything was. The only lights came from lanterns and our phones, the stars flickering above like distant, uncaring eyes. My 2 dogs were curled at my feet under a sleeping bag. They were happy earlier, running wild through the burned-out trails, chasing rabbits, rolling in dust. But now they were stiff, alert. Their heads were up, ears twitching. Not whining. Not barking. Just listening. That's what struck me first. Their silence. Then I noticed everyone else had stopped talking too. We all felt it at the same time, that sudden shift. Like something just stepped into the woods with us. The air grew heavy, not cold exactly, but tense. Charged. The kind of tension you feel just before a fight breaks out, or lightning strikes. And then we heard it. Footsteps. Bipedal. Moving fast. Coming up the slope. That was the part that chilled me. That slope, right behind our tents, was steep, covered in leaves and loose gravel. We'd tried walking it earlier that day, and nearly busted our asses slipping down it. No one could have come up that fast, not without tripping, sliding, making noise. But this thing? It moved like the incline didn't exist. We went silent, trying to rationalize it. Bear? Maybe. But it didn't sound like a bear. The gait was wrong. Bears don't walk upright that long. They lumber. This was deliberate. My partner glanced at me. "That's not an animal," she whispered. We didn't run, but we didn't stay passive either. One of the guys got the generator going, its sharp whirring breaking the silence like a lifeline. It didn't feel brave. It felt desperate. The noise didn't return. That night, none of us really slept. My dogs didn't lie down again. They stayed pressed against the tent flap, muscles tight, eyes locked on the treeline. In the morning, we found footprints. Not boots. Not paws. Barefoot. Human-like. but huge. We didn't talk about it at first. Just looked at each other, pretending it was some old hiker who'd wandered through in the dark. But no one goes barefoot in that terrain. And not uphill. Not at that speed. The second night, we tried to laugh it off. Made jokes about mountain ghosts and feral survivalists. But when the sun dropped, so did our confidence. It started again just after 10 p.m. The silence. Then the smell. Wet dog. Rotting moss. Sweat and blood. It came on like a wave, not strong enough to make you gag, but wrong. Wrong for that time of night, wrong for the cold. The dogs started growling low in their throats. One of them barked once, then whined and backed into the tent. We didn't wait this time. We shut down everything. No lights. No music. No talking. That's when we heard the tree knock. A sharp, hollow crack, like a bat slamming into a trunk. One hit. Then another, deeper, echoing down the ridge. Something was signaling. It wasn't alone. We stayed awake in absolute silence, clutching flashlights and knives like either would help. No one wanted to be the one to say it out loud, but we all thought the same thing. It was watching us. Not a bear. Not a coyote. Something older. Something that knew this land better than we ever could. When morning came, the smell was gone. The prints were fresher. Closer. We left that day. And I haven't been back since. I live in the valley now, but my house isn't far from the river. Tule River, where the Yokuts people tell stories of the Mayak Daytat. The hairy man. They say he's a guardian of the forest. That he appears before disaster. That he protects what's his. But they also say he doesn't like outsiders. I'm not from Tule. I'm Metis from the north. I grew up on stories too, but not like this. I was taught not to whistle at night. Not to give my name to the water. To never disrespect the woods. And I think we did. I think we camped somewhere we weren't supposed to. And something let us know. I was 14 the summer it happened. My family had a small piece of land outside Cherokee, North Carolina, about 40 minutes into the woods, past where most people stopped caring if there was still pavement under their tires. We didn't live there full time. It was a hunting property mostly. A trailer, a tool shed, a lean-to full of rusted gear, and an old four-wheeler that barely worked but could still scream down the trails if you kicked it just right. That's what I was doing that evening, riding. It was just me. My parents were inside playing cards with my uncle and aunt. I remember the heat had finally broken that day, and the trees had this coppery golden light pouring through the canopy. It made the woods look dreamlike, glowing, endless, untouched. I took the four-wheeler out a little before sunset. I was too young to be going that deep alone, but I'd done it a dozen times. The trails were familiar, and the hum of the engine in my chest felt like freedom. I didn't take a flashlight. Didn't bring a phone. I didn't think I'd need them. Big mistake. I was about 4 miles from the trailer when the engine died. No sputter. No warning. Just gone. Like someone had yanked the power from the air itself. The silence hit hard. The kind of silence that makes your skin feel too tight. I tried to restart it. Nothing. Pressed the throttle. Nothing. I looked around, but the trail behind me had already faded into shadow. There was no wind. No birds. No cicadas. Not even the hum of mosquitoes. It was like the woods were holding their breath. That's when I felt it. You know that sensation, when someone's looking at you, like a thread pulling at the back of your neck. I turned slowly, and I saw it. It was standing maybe 30 feet away, partially behind a tree, and at first, I thought it was just a person. A tall one. But then my brain started trying to make sense of the shape, and failing. It was pale. Sickly white, like milk left out in the sun too long. No clothes. Just skin. Long arms that hung too low. Shoulders hunched forward like it had never stood upright properly. Its body was narrow, stretched in places that shouldn't be stretched. Limbs too long, neck too thin. It looked starved but not weak. Coiled. And it was looking at me. Its face, God, its face was wrong. Sunken. Hollow. Big eyes too wide, like they didn't know how to blink. And a mouth that stretched too far across its skull. It didn't snarl. It didn't move. Just stared. I froze. Then it twitched. Not a full movement. Just a shift. Like a glitch in a video, one frame off. Its arm jerked, or its head tilted too far too fast. I blinked and it was still. Blinked again, and it was closer. Not walking. Not running. Just closer. I don't remember screaming. I remember my hands on the handlebar, pounding the start button like my life depended on it. Because it did. The engine coughed. then whined, then finally roared to life with a screech. I turned and tore down the trail like hell was on my heels. I didn't look back. I couldn't. Every instinct screamed, "Don't turn around." But just as I reached the clearing before the trailer, I heard it. My name, spoken softly, right behind me, like someone was standing over my shoulder and whispering into my ear. But no one was there. I tore across the yard, dropped the four-wheeler without shutting it off, and ran straight into the trailer. Everyone looked up, beer in hand, cards on the table. My mom laughed. "You look like you saw a ghost." I didn't answer. I didn't sleep that night. Couldn't. Every creak of the floorboards, every gust of wind against the tin roof sounded like footsteps. I told my cousin the next morning. He stared at me too long, then said, real quiet, "People see things in those woods. Things that don't belong to this world." He told me about old stories, of pale creatures that live between trees, feeding on fear and silence, of watchers that wait for people to stray too far from the firelight. He said the Cherokee, don't name them out loud, that names are invitations. I've only been back to that property once since then, just long enough to grab gear and go.